Good evening and welcome to tonight's program. My name is Dr. Morel Lukey and I am the curator at the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Library and Museum. Before I turn the program over to our director, Brooke Clement, I'd like to thank the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Foundation for support of tonight's event. I also wanted to take this opportunity to look ahead to upcoming programs. In April, the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Foundation will be hosting the West Michigan debut of She Did All That, Betty Ford Speaking Out, Saving Lives, a documentary play written by Lisa Rafferty. For information on attending, visit the Foundation's website. In addition, watch your inbox for information about the upcoming panel discussion, Women Who Served, which will be held at the end of April. I'd also like to remind you that if you have questions for tonight's speaker, please use the Q&A box on the screen anytime during the presentation. Now I invite Brooke Clement to introduce tonight's speaker.
Thank you, Morel. As director of the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Library and Museum, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's virtual program, Women in Uniform, My Career in the FBI, with Special Agent in Charge, Jacqueline Maguire. As March in Women's History Month comes to an end, tonight's program is also being held in conjunction with our feature exhibit, Women in Uniform. This exhibit showcases rarely displayed art from the Naval History and Heritage Command's collections. The selected works highlight the continuous and growing presence of women in the U.S. Navy throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. Women in Uniform is on display at the museum in Grand Rapids until May 6th. Tickets are available online. Tonight's guest is the Special Agent in Charge of the FBI's Philadelphia Field Office. Jacqueline Maguire assumed this role in November 2021. She was first assigned to the New York Field Office when she joined the FBI as a special agent in 2000 and served as a member of the Joint Terrorism Task Force. She was also the lead agent for the investigation of the 5 hijackers of American Airlines Flight 77 following the 9/11 terror attacks. Ms. Maguire has earned several awards during her FBI career, including the 2006 Attorney General's Award for Excellence in Furthering the Interests of U.S. National Security and the 2009 Attorney General's Award for Distinguished Service. Before joining the FBI, Ms. Maguire worked at the Office of the Medical Examiner in Suffolk County, New York. Please join me in welcoming Special Agent in Charge, Jacqueline Maguire, to our virtual stage.
Thank you very much, Brooke. Could I just get a sound check? Can you hear me okay? Great. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me here tonight. I'm thrilled to be with you all. And I first want to extend my appreciation to the Ford Museum and to Morel and Brooke for asking me to be part of this important event. I want to thank everyone in the audience for taking the time out tonight and this evening to listen. And I'm going to share some thoughts on my career. I'm going to talk about my experience in 9/11 because it really did change my career path and change the FBI. And I'll share a few thoughts about the FBI in general and some thoughts I share with new agents who join us here in the Philadelphia office. So this month, I actually celebrated my 22nd anniversary in the FBI as a special agent. And growing up in New York on Long Island, I never imagined becoming an FBI agent when I was younger. I actually wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid. And then in high school and college, I became more interested in the biological sciences, and I set my sights on becoming a doctor. But by the time I graduated from Villanova University here outside of Philadelphia, and apologies to any Michigan men's basketball fans out there, it was a tough loss, but I'm a diehard Villanova fan. I'm excited to cheer us on in the Final Four this coming weekend. But when I graduated Villanova, like so many young people, I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do in life. And I returned home to Long Island, where I soon became interested in forensic science. And with the encouragement of my mom, I applied for and was fortunate to obtain an internship at the local county medical examiner's office. And I ended up staying there to work in the morgue for the next few years. And through my work there at the medical examiner's office, I was exposed to not only the science of forensics, but also to the criminal justice aspect. And I found both pieces of the job to be fascinating. And I was lucky to meet some FBI agents along the way. And that was when I decided to pursue a career with the FBI. So as Brooke said, I graduated from the FBI Academy, which is in Quantico, Virginia, in 2000. And my first field office assignment was to the New York office, where I ended up working on a squad that worked counterterrorism matters. And I loved my job as a new agent. I loved my colleagues and the mission of the FBI and the sense of camaraderie that I felt in the office. Every day as a new agent, I felt honored to be part of the FBI. And now 22 years later, I still feel the same way. I could say I am biased, but it is the best law enforcement agency in the world. But as we know, in 2001, that world changed dramatically. And so many people point to September 11th, 2001 as really a turning point in our history. Much like the invasion of Normandy or the assassination of President Kennedy, September 11th was a turning point for America and for us as Americans. And it certainly was a turning point for the FBI and for my career as well. As we know, on that horrific day, thousands of innocent people and many more since lost their lives at the hands of terrorists, evil and twisted and psychotic, in ways in which we as a country had not previously realized or witnessed. And as an FBI agent in New York, I responded to the World Trade Center that morning. But of course, there was not much we could do that terrible day. Over the next decade and ever since, though, 9/11 would come to define my job, first as one of the case agents on the investigation into the attacks, and now today as a special agent in charge in an FBI that looks a lot different than it did before 9/11. Since then, I've thought a lot about the innocent people and the innocence that we lost that day. I always think it's helpful, though, to look and think about September 11th in a different context, by thinking about the day before and the day after, by thinking about September 10th and September 12th, 2001. September 10th, 2001, if you recall, was a Monday. Our former Secretary of State, Colin Powell, was on the cover of Time magazine. The New York Yankees were in first place in the American League East. And like the day that would follow, the weather was perfect. When the sun set on September 11th, 2001, evil was something both abstract and pretty distant, at least for most of us. Evil is something that we in law enforcement do confront, though thankfully not that often. More often, evil is the byproduct of Hollywood screenwriters, and less often a byproduct of society. But those 19 terrorists who struck on 9/11 and their supporters and their financiers around the world were evil in pretty much every sense of the word. We relearned an important lesson that day, not just about the sanctity of life and the value of family and friends, but also that there's evil in the world and that we must combat it. In the FBI, we must combat it in every place and in every form in which we find it. When the sun rose the next day on September 12th, 2001, the world it lit was very different. But the story of September 12th and the days and the weeks and the months that followed was not primarily a story of that evil that struck. Rather, it was a story of hope and courage and survival. And as a new agent in the FBI, I saw it as a story of honor and valor and service. What I saw as a new agent in the FBI on September 12th was through a very different lens. But it was the strength of our nation and not the weakness that the terrorists had imagined. As many of us recall, we saw the images of first responders, police officers, and rescue personnel racing toward the burning towers as others ran from them. We saw images of the firefighters running up the stairs as others went down. We saw uniformed members of our military and their civilian colleagues treating the wounded on the lawn outside the Pentagon. And we heard the tale of the passengers aboard a doomed flight, United 93, fighting for control of the plane over Somerset County, Pennsylvania, about 150 miles short of its target in Washington, D.C. We saw a response to the 9/11 attacks and to the suffering of its victims that made us proud to be Americans. And it made me proud to be in the FBI. What we saw on September 12th and thereafter was our collective strength. What we saw in the face of that evil was really a greater good. And I saw it firsthand in the FBI. I'd like to share a story that is an example of that good. A few months after 9/11, I returned to visit the New York office from FBI headquarters, where I had relocated in early 2001, of October of 2001, with colleagues from New York to form the investigative team in Washington, D.C. And I was straightening up my old desk in the New York office when I came upon a piece of paper and a stack of documents. When I realized what it was and what it meant, I was reminded of that collective strength that we saw. It was a list handwritten on September 11th by a squad mate to keep track of those of us who had responded to the World Trade Center that morning. Thankfully, everyone on the list survived. I had responded with Frank, a task force officer from the New York, New Jersey Port Authority Police Department with whom I worked. And as the list indicated, at 10:20 a.m., it said, we were marked okay. To this day, I keep that list with my FBI credentials, but not as a reminder of the evil we witnessed on September 11th. I keep it with me as a reminder of the greater good we saw in its aftermath. On a day that our nation lost so many, that list is a reminder to me of how we cared about one another, the men and women on one particular squad in one particular FBI field office on one particular day. We know there's evil in this world and that we must combat it. And the 9/11 attacks, the horrific attacks, reminded us of that simple truth. But there's another simple truth. And again, this is a lesson I've learned in the FBI, that life is all the more valuable because of the family and friends and the colleagues that we share it with. We talk a lot here at the FBI about the FBI family. And more than 22 years in, I'm still a proud member of that family. Now, like all families, there may be squabbles from time to time, but at the end of the day, we have a common bond, and that's our mission, the mission of the FBI, to protect the American people and uphold the Constitution of the United States. One of the best parts of my current job here in Philadelphia as a special agent in charge is meeting with all the new agents who come join us out of Quantico, join our office in Philadelphia. And I love hearing their stories, hearing how they became interested in a career in the FBI, and hearing their interesting and varied and impressive backgrounds. And in turn, I share with them some lessons I have learned throughout my career. And I ask them to keep a few things in mind. I ask them to remain open to all the opportunities and experiences that the FBI has to offer. I recall how, as a new agent myself, I would have envisioned my career to be in New York for the entire time. Instead, I left New York not long after starting there, and I've been fortunate ever since to serve in 3 other field offices as well as our headquarters in Washington, D.C. Never would I have thought back then that I would live in Birmingham, Alabama for a couple of years, or that I would have the position I have now leading one of the largest field offices. I also recall to the new agents how back when I was in the FBI Academy, we didn't talk about the cyber threat. It didn't exist. And now today, it's something we talk about every day, with threats coming at us from both cyber criminals as well as state-sponsored actors. I also ask the new agents to remember that they must lead through what I say is their eyes, ears, mind, and heart. In other words, I ask them to see clearly. I ask them to be aware of themselves and others, to see others' perspectives. I ask them to be good listeners, to use their ears in all aspects of our job. I ask them to pay attention to their common sense and their good judgment and use their mind. And I ask them to keep in their hearts and always be passionate about our mission. Everyone knows the FBI stands for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, but it also forms the core of our motto: fidelity, bravery, and integrity. Fidelity, bravery, and integrity. Together in the FBI, these are the values that guide us through difficult decisions and difficult times. Together, these are the core concepts by which we try to lead good and productive lives and impactful careers, and by which we try to leave something behind for those that follow us in the Bureau. Together, we think of these as hallmarks of a life and a career well lived. For each of these concepts, we can look back to examples from 9/11 and many other instances since, as we strive to adhere to these three values throughout our lives as agents and FBI employees. We could all recall the fidelity, the loyalty to country and to fellow citizens of those Americans who responded with an even greater good on September 12th. We can recall the bravery, the courage of those in uniform who move in the opposite direction toward the burning building or toward the sound of gunfire. We can recall the integrity, the consistency of character of those in public service who uphold the ideals of their professions as they serve to try to change lives. So when I meet with the new agents, I ask them to continue to combat evil in every form in which we find it as we protect the American people and uphold the Constitution. And I ask them to continue to take care of each other, to keep track of each other, to mark each other okay at the end of each day, just like my squad mate did on 9/11. That's who we are in the FBI. That's what I've learned throughout my career here. I've been fortunate to be able to learn those lessons, to be able to be part of the FBI family, because at the end of the day, that's what matters. That's our greater good. So again, I appreciate the invitation of the Ford Museum to have me speak here tonight. I want to thank you all for joining us, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. This was very interesting. And as somebody who was in New York City on 9/11, I'm curious what your perceptions of that day was like as well, and then how it was that you became selected to be part of these task forces.
Sure, thank you, Brooke. As a new agent, I was assigned to the Joint Terrorism Task Force, which at the time was the largest and still is the largest, although every field office nowadays in the FBI has what we refer to as a JTTF. Before 9/11, that wasn't the case. Not every office had it, but New York had a large JTTF, and I was assigned to one of the squads. So when the attacks happened, and about a month after the attacks, our then Director Mueller, made the decision that the case should be worked out of our headquarters because it was such a global investigation. So a team from New York and a team from our Washington, D.C. office went to headquarters and integrated. And in those days, every person in the FBI was working on the 9/11 case. But the core team and myself, we ended up working that case for the next about 10 years. And of course, there's people still working it as we still have co-conspirators in Guantanamo. So I was fortunate because the team they picked, and looking back as a leader now, I think it was a good leadership move that my bosses in New York chose both very experienced agents and pretty brand new agents like myself to be able to work and learn from the older and more experienced agents. So again, I was fortunate to be one of those new agents selected, and I was willing to do anything to do the smallest task. And that's something else I always tell the new agents, that nothing is above any of us. So I was just, again, it was an amazing experience that was born out of a horrific event. But I felt fortunate to be able to give something back and work on that case.
Mm-hmm. Now, as an FBI agent, are you able to write books about your experiences? For instance, 9/11.
Not necessarily when we're still on the job. A lot of retired agents will write books about their experiences. But we do have, like many in the government, have a pre-publication review process so that anything we write that we learned or that we, was an experience that we had within the FBI needs to be reviewed just to make sure, first and foremost, that there's no classified information within the book, and that we don't give up any sort of, techniques or different tools that we use that we may not want the bad guys to know about. So we are able to do that most often after retirement, if you so choose, but it is rightly so something that is reviewed beforehand.
I have a question in from Deborah Kaplan, and she is wondering if you can comment on the events of January 6th last year, and kind of contrast it to 9/11.
Sure, I can't comment. January 6th, as many of us know, there's a lot of investigations and court cases that are still pending as a result of the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. And my recollection and my experience on 9/11 is firsthand. And I was in New York on January 6th, so I don't have the same sort of firsthand experience of having been there, been on the ground. But certainly another watershed moment in our history, and the FBI was integrally involved and had, as we know, hundreds of investigations that were born out of that day, and many prosecutions that are still ongoing. So I'm unfortunately not able to comment on the case specifically because those cases are still making their way through the judicial system.
Got it. That makes sense. So as we've mentioned early on, we have an exhibit on women in uniform, and obviously, you don't necessarily wear a military uniform, but I just wondered what it's like for you, your experiences as a woman in the FBI, what you may have noticed about different personalities, or what's it like to be a woman in the FBI in general?
Sure. I think we all have our different experiences, and I have been fortunate that I never felt I was treated differently because I was a woman. I think it's a place that, years ago, I sent an email out to my office here in Philadelphia in honor of Women's History Month last week, and I included an excerpt of a letter from J. Edgar Hoover, the first director of the FBI. And this letter was, as I recall, it was a response to the University of Colorado, who had alleged the FBI was violating equal employment opportunity laws by not allowing women to become agents. And I believe this might have been in the late 60s, early 70s that this exchange went on. And in the letter, J. Edgar Hoover laid out his argument and said more or less that, we have to have agents who are able to be up to the task, and they must be able to be ready at a moment's notice, and therefore they must be male. So it was not uncoincidental that the first women in modern history entered the FBI Academy months after J. Edgar Hoover died. So thankfully that policy was changed, and this year we'll be celebrating the 50th anniversary of female agents in the FBI in the modern era. There actually was a quick history lesson. There was actually 3 women in the FBI in its early days back in the 1920s, and they both served a couple of years, including a woman named Lenore Houston, who served here in the Philadelphia office. So kind of interesting that way back then, but then, it was another 40-something years before Hoover allowed women, before they were allowed in. And again, it was after Hoover's death. So I'm fortunate that those policies changed, and that there were a lot of females who came before me and paved the way, and a lot of males who came before and supported the idea that women, have served on our SWAT teams, women have led major investigations, women have held leadership positions. And me personally, like I said, I've never felt like I was treated any differently. I never felt that I was discriminated against. Everyone has their different experiences. I never, I have said before, I've never strived to be a good female agent. I have strived to be a good agent overall. and I want to be treated equally. And there's many different ways that manifests itself, including, as a woman, your wardrobe is a little different. So you have to come up with creative ways of wearing your gun on your hip, which is a little tougher than it is for guys. But you adapt, and we share some ideas and recommendations with each other. And, again, I have been treated equally. I want to be treated equally, and I'll act equally, which means carrying my gun just like the guys do, even if it means, not wearing the most trendy of clothes these days.
The things that we have to think about.
Right.
So Pamela is asking how the FBI works with the CIA in dealing with terrorist issues.
Sure. So we work closely with the CIA as both members of the intelligence community, the United States intelligence community. And the CIA has a presence overseas. We actually also have a presence overseas. So the FBI has 56 field offices here in the United States, at least one in every major city. There's some, so here in Philadelphia, for example, my office here, we cover the eastern half of Pennsylvania, whereas Pittsburgh covers the western half. Michigan, we have an office in Detroit, and then we also have what we call resident agencies, which are satellite offices throughout the states in smaller, more suburban and rural areas. So for an example, Detroit in Michigan is our main office, but then there's RAs, resident agencies in Lansing and Ann Arbor and a few other locations. And same here in Philadelphia, we have some resident agencies throughout the eastern half of the state. But we also have an overseas presence. So we have what we call legal attaches, which are the FBI representatives in embassies overseas. And that number changes throughout the year, but I think we're probably at about 60 something, almost 70 legal attaches throughout the world. And those are our liaisons with our foreign service and with our counterparts overseas from other government agencies. So, I joke that cyber wasn't a thing back when I was in the academy, and I work in a very different FBI than the one I started in. It's a better FBI, it's stronger, it's more integrated with other members of the intelligence community, because we all have heard the stories of some shortcomings in that coordination between the FBI and the CIA before 9/11. And it is a much stronger relationship now, both in counterterrorism. So, the world is much more global, much more connected now, because you could be sitting anywhere in the world, right? And through social media can be talking to anyone else. And no longer do people have to go overseas to become radicalized and go to terrorist training camps. They could do that from their own basement, as long as they have an internet connection and access, and they could read material that could radicalize them. So it's imperative upon us to work closely with the CIA, and we do in cases that touch overseas these days, not only in counterterrorism, but in counterintelligence, in cyber, weapons of mass destruction, throughout all different programs that we work. But bottom line is that relationship has become, I've witnessed it, it has become much better and stronger in the years. And we have similar mission between the FBI and CIA. It aligns, but we also have very different work that we do, but we complement each other. So if there is a terrorism case overseas, and they might have some more information overseas through their liaison, through their sources that we may not necessarily have. So it's important for both of us to share information with each other.
Mm-hmm. So we have a question where I'm gonna skip over one for now, because I like the question, and I would just want to make sure that we might just close on this question. But anyway, we have a question about how many agents are in the Philadelphia field office and how many investigations might be underway at any one time. And is there a shortage of staff? Can your field office meet its obligations, etc.?
Sure. So the number of agents overall, I'll start way up high and then get down. Overall, the FBI has about a total of 36,000 employees. And of those, about 12,000, it goes between 12 and 13,000 are special agents. So we have a range of other job positions, from intelligence analysts to a range of professional staff positions, linguists, computer scientists, data scientists, auto mechanics, pilots, a lot of different technical roles, especially these days, scientists in our lab, biologists, fingerprint experts across the board. And then we have all the sort of support functions, that we as agents can't do our job without our human resources personnel and our security personnel, our facilities, making sure that we have a safe workspace, that I'm sitting in a very nice conference room here, and that we have the ability to do our job safely and carefully when we're in the office, and then making sure our equipment is safe and secure when we go out on the street, our cars and our weapons and everything else, our trucks and all. So a range of different job families in the FBI. So of those 12,000, again, throughout 56 field offices and 60 plus legal attaches, which aren't very big overseas, but Philadelphia is, without getting into specific numbers, Philadelphia is in the top 10 largest of our field offices. The New York office is the largest office. And we have a few hundred agents here in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, covering the eastern half of the state. I'm sorry, Pittsburgh covers the western half. But I think the second part of that question is if we have enough to do our job. And we'd always take more, right? But I think we do a good job with our resources. We have a very defined process to prioritize the threats that we face, both on a national level as an organization, but then each field office prioritizes what threats are in our area. And that goes, again, across the board. So the FBI covers a range of threats. And we've already mentioned cyber, we've talked about counterterrorism. And there's the traditional criminal threats, everything from gangs and drugs and guns, violent crime, which is a big issue in so many cities these days, including here in Philadelphia. And I know out there in Detroit and so many big cities. We have white collar crime, public corruption, civil rights, hate crimes. So we have a lot of different programs, different threats. And again, by using our priority process to figure out what is the biggest threat that we face and where do we need to put our resources, I think we do a good job, and we're able to, with the personnel that we have. And we get new agents all the time because we also have a retirement system, where as an agent, we have to retire with a mandatory retirement at the age of 57, which is young these days. Yeah, it's kind of an old-fashioned concept, but we have a 20-year retirement, but you need to be at least age 50, and by age 57, you're able to possibly get a couple of extensions, 1-year extensions at the end, but 57 for any federal law enforcement agent is usually the mandatory age. So it's important we get those new agents in to supplement and to take the place of us who eventually, unfortunately, have to move on and leave the Bureau. But I think, again, through our threat prioritization, we do a good job of being able to put our resources where we need them the most.
How interesting. And then just following up on that, do agents get to decide what special task forces they're assigned to or what work on, or is that something that's kind of determined higher up?
It's determined according, as we say, to the needs of the Bureau, where we take a look at what the agent's background is. So one of the most interesting and I think important things about the FBI, about becoming an agent, is that you need some professional work experience before you become an agent. So I spoke of mine was in a local medical examiner's office, but we get a range of people with different experience, whether it's former military, former law enforcement, anything. One of my classmates in the academy had worked in the airline industry. We have attorneys, we have accountants, but we also, have psychologists and teachers. We get, surprisingly, something I never would think about. We get a lot of teachers who become agents, and they become great agents because the attention to detail, and they have a lot of the same traits that are desirable in successful agents. So when you come into the academy, you are able to give a preference of what programs you'd like to work. And I know that's considered, but it all depends again on where do we need our resources, where do we have openings, where is the threat the biggest. So I think the balance of what we need, the needs of the Bureau, along with what skills and expertise someone is bringing to us. And hopefully we do a good job of getting them the right assignment.
And then I've got a couple of questions here from Anne and Kathleen, and this just kind of follows right along with the line of questions we've been asked. How are agents recruited? And to be considered as an agent, do you have to present a certain psychological profile? That type of thing.
Sure. So we spend a lot of time talking about how to best recruit, and we want something that we have to do better, and we have done better, is to get a diverse agent workforce and a diverse workforce overall. But as agents, we want to be sure we're out in the community where I speak about talking to the new agents and making sure they remember, it's so important in our job to be good listeners and to see things from other people's perspectives, because as I look at it, at the end of the day, we talk with people for a living. We talk with subjects and witnesses and victims and sources, and we have to understand their perspective. So we need to reflect how the communities look, and we need to be representative of that. So it's important for us to have a diverse workforce. We talk a lot about recruiting these days, and we recruit almost from a very young age through our community outreach program. We have junior special agent programs in elementary schools throughout the country. We have teen academies in many of our field offices that run their summer programs. Some are a week long, some are shorter or longer than that, but for high school students who are interested in criminal justice and intelligence and law enforcement. We recruit in colleges across the board. And again, depending on what threats we face. So you look over history and you look back to the 1980s and the savings and loan scandal. So accountants and attorneys are very desirable to bring on board as agents. As we moved into the post 9/11 era, there was a lot of former military, former law enforcement, a lot of agents who the Bureau was seeking out, agents who spoke different languages. Nowadays, we're looking more and more for agents who have a cyber expertise, who have computer science backgrounds. That doesn't say we are ignoring. We're still looking for the former military and the former law enforcement. Myself, I have a science background. I worked in a morgue. That was a bit of a different perspective and background to bring. So we try to recruit, again, across the board. I always like, if we talk to a high school group, even an elementary school, and we're able to maybe plant the seed in one child's head that, wow, that's something that I might be able to do, that I want to do, and they aspire and work hard to become an agent. I think that's a success story. And we also recruit at an adult level. I know other people like myself that didn't think about the FBI until post-college. So we have many people who come in because they grew up, watching FBI movies and reading about it. And this is something they always dreamed of since they were a little kid. But also it's important to get out there to make sure because our hiring, we hire people for agents up to about age of 37. If you have prior military experience, you get a little bit longer. You get an extension on that. But otherwise, we have a cap, again, just federal regulation for federal law enforcement. But That means we can recruit people. Our average age, I think, usually hovers around 30 or 31 for new agents coming in, because it's so important they have that other previous professional work experience. So again, we recruit people from all walks of life, and the process. So I know there's a question regarding, do you have to present a certain psychological profile? The process is pretty lengthy and extensive. We have a excuse me, a two-phase testing process. The first phase is a written test. You get past that. The second phase is a panel interview with 3 current agents. And it's usually situational based questions. So in a way that's, you know, sort of sussing out your competencies and your values that you're bringing with you, and a little bit of your profile, your psychological profile. And then we go through, if you get through those phases, you go through an extensive background investigation. And speaking firsthand, you have to talk about every, you know, give over every address that you lived, references, every job that you ever had, even part-time jobs in college and high school. And it's an extensive background. So through that, the questions that they ask your family and your friends and your former colleagues and bosses really get a good idea of what kind of person that you are. So that kind of explains the process. So I think I covered, you know, both ends of how we recruit and what the application process consists of.
Yes, thank you. Kathleen would like to know if you could comment on the reality and or the fantasy of FBI programming on TV.
It's just like it is on TV. Well, there certainly is similarities, you know, even again, 22 years in, and there are some days where I sit and say, wow, that is really cool that we could do that. I didn't realize we had that capability, or I didn't know we had that technology, and it's evolving all the time. So yeah, we're able to do some pretty cool things. Where I always laugh and say we're not always, you know, as good looking. Hopefully we're as fit as the people on TV, but it takes a lot longer to solve crimes than it does on TV. Yeah, I talk about being interested in forensic science, and that was back in the 90s. That was before the CSI and all the different shows of CSI. And you know, working with our lab, it really is amazing the technology that we have. And we talk a lot about innovation and always trying to evolve and adapt, because, you know, the criminals, the bad guys are doing that too. They're adapting, they're using technology. So we have to try as best we can to stay one step ahead of them. So, you know, I think the biggest difference from TV is how quickly things move in TV. You know, we work closely with our U.S. attorney's offices, who are the prosecutors. We investigate the case, they prosecute it in court. And sometimes you serve a subpoena and you have to wait to get the records back from a company, and it doesn't come back as instantaneously as it does on television. Or, you know, they sometimes, if I watch those shows, you laugh because we're very careful. You know, I talk about our mission is to protect the American people and to uphold the Constitution. And we can't do one without the other. We can't do one piece of that without the other. And by upholding the Constitution, we have to protect people's civil liberties. So we have to have court process. We have to have predication to do anything that we do. We have to, you know, yes, we have wiretaps and we look at people's email accounts, but we have to do that with a court order. We have to have a judge saying, yes, you have the right to do that. You have collected enough evidence to show us that that is something that is appropriate. And on TV, they don't always seem to go through that process all the time. It seems to be more of a press of a button and that information pops up on the screen. So it doesn't always come together as quickly. But there are still a lot of just as cool things that we're able to do here.
Anne would like to know if all FBI employees have guns, if everyone is trained to use the guns, or if that's a select few.
Sure. Every FBI agent carries a weapon, carries a gun. Like I said, we have 36 or so thousand employees. Not every employee carries a gun, only the special agents do, only the sworn law enforcement. The other would be considered more of a civilian position. And at Quantico, so we go through training at Quantico, which usually it goes from, I think it's about 5 months long now. It's varied over the years, but about 5 months or so of training. And a heavy part of that is firearms training. So it doesn't matter whether you come in from the military and are very experienced in weapons and shooting guns, or like myself, you come in and really have had no experience with guns. We have some of the, I would say, best instructors in the world, top-notch instructors, and they actually like to have people who've never shot guns because they want to make sure they're doing it the right way, and they don't have to reteach people who may have picked up habits along the way that don't sort of, conform to our standards. So we all leave Quantico. We spend a lot of time on the range on firearms, and the other courses of instruction at Quantico are academics, legal instruction, interview instruction. We have, of course, physical fitness. We have tactical instruction, practical applications, which if anyone's heard of Hogan's Alley, which is at our academy in Quantico, Hogan's Alley is sort of this fictional fake town that was built at Quantico, and it's a flashback from the past. And there's a movie theater and a pharmacy and a bar and a hotel, and that's where we get to practice arrest scenarios or search warrant scenarios and real life situations. They have role players down there, which are usually local members of the community. That's their job, is to be a role player for the FBI, and they're very good at playing the bad guys and putting the new agents through the trenches of how to react and how not to react in certain situations. So everyone, again, all agents carry guns. We are required to qualify, like most police departments have different, law enforcement agencies have different requirements for qualifications. We're required to qualify on our weapons 4 times a year. And we put a lot of practice into that. And thankfully, hopefully you don't have to use it. We do have a deadly force policy that's very strict in the Department of Justice, which is our cabinet level department in the executive branch of the US government. Every time a member of my team here, any team goes out in Philadelphia or anywhere in the FBI on an arrest warrant, an operations plan is put together. That operations plan is briefed, make sure that the whole team who's going to be out on the operation to arrest a subject is aware of what the plan is, and the deadly force policy has to be briefed. Doesn't matter if you've been in the FBI for 1 month or 25 years, you're going to hear that deadly force policy when you do the briefing, the pre-planning for that operation. And everyone must acknowledge, yes, I understand it, because it's important to make sure that we're reacting in the correct way and whether it is appropriate to use our weapon.
So the FBI has a culture of respecting civil liberties. Does it frustrate you at all that sometimes you can't get a prosecution or a conviction for someone who's done something that is illegal?
I honestly would say no. We work very closely with our U.S. attorney's offices and with prosecutors, and I think it's fair to say that the federal government has a pretty good track record in court, because cases aren't often taken to court if they aren't ready to go. There's strong cases, and if it is not strong, then it shouldn't go to court, and we're not there yet. And either the case honestly isn't there, or we need to work harder and work longer to get more evidence to corroborate information that we're receiving from people. So I think, again, at times there probably are some frustrations, because we have some hard charging individuals who want to get the bad people off the street. But I think it's fair to say that we all understand that we have to have high standards. We have to have high standards in our our processes and our policies, our practices, and in our investigations. And if a case or evidence is not at a high standard, then it shouldn't make its way to court.
Has the FBI done any work on COVID that you're aware of, like research-wise or anything of that nature?
Yeah, not so much research. I mean, I think they're probably in the US intelligence community that's been a discussion, but certainly nowadays we're doing a lot of work on COVID fraud. Unfortunately, as is unfortunate in many different scenarios that people exploit these sorts of situations. So we have a good number of cases and prosecutions on fraud against the government when it comes to COVID relief loans, on Payroll Protection Act loans, unemployment fraud. We're working closely with our government partners, Department of Labor, Small Business Administration, to work on those cases. And I think you'll see pretty regular drumbeat of those in the news as more and more people are charged and prosecuted and sentenced for those. And it's something that we are on top of, that the Department of Justice is made a priority. So we're seeing more and more of that sort of stuff that we're certainly dedicating resources to.
Well, that's unfortunate, but very interesting. So I'm going to end with this question from one of our younger viewers this evening, and then we'll kick it back over to Morel. But as a young adult, what would you recommend this person do to pursue a career in the FBI?
I would say go for it. I would say, you know, I'm often asked, you know, for people who are going into college or in college, of what should I major in? And as I said, you know, yes, we sometimes have expertise in areas of study that we're definitely seeking out. So these days it's cyber, it's computer science. But I think the best piece of advice that I could share for someone who is going into college, is pursue something that you're passionate about, something that you are interested in. Don't just go to computer science or, you know, cyber stuff or criminal justice because you want to get in the FBI. Pursue something that you're passionate about, because again, you're going to reach the end of your FBI career and to have, you know, something else in the future. But also when you go through the application process, if you majored in something and you studied a subject area and then you worked in that subject area, your passion and your interest in it will come across and be a lot more sincere than to be able to say, oh, I studied criminal justice because I really want to be in the FBI. You know, we'll teach you criminal justice when you get here. You know, they teach criminal justice in the academy. We want you to bring something of value to us. So whether that's a foreign language, whether that's science, any STEM study area, you know, anything in technology. Like I said, you know, I've met a lot of new agents who had been teachers and they make great case agents. If education and teaching is your passion, follow that for a few years. Outside of school and study, we do have a drug policy. And that drug policy has changed as times have changed, but we do still have a drug policy, and you will be drug tested, and you have to go on a polygraph and you know, and swear on the polygraph that you have not partaken in drugs over a certain amount of time and a certain amount of instances. So you have to concentrate on living, you know, a good life, you know, and being cognizant of that in this world. Depending on your age, you know, I grew up and went to college before social media, and sometimes I'm thankful for that. But these days, you know, anything that's put online, even though you think you may delete it, it's not deleted, it's out there, and you got to be careful of that. So I think those are the two things: study something and pursue the track that you're passionate about, that you're interested in, because that will reflect well when you try to become an agent or anything in the FBI, any role, any job family. And second, you know, lead a clean life, be a good person, be a good citizen. We have our motto, but we also have our core values of fairness and diversity and trust and honesty, and you really have to come in believing in those core values and having lived them, because they will come up in your background investigation. Your friends, your family will be asked about that stuff. So that's the best advice that I would give, is seek out a passion, bring value to us, show why you're different. As my mother always said, no one ever could take education away from you. So seek out education, seek out graduate degrees and all that, and good work experience, and be a good citizen, be a good person, help others, and live clean, and good luck. It's a great career, and I hope whoever asked that question, I hope they pursue it.
Such great advice to end on. Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for joining us this evening. And I believe Dr. Lukey is coming back on. Yep, here she is. So again, thank you so much, Jacqueline. It was fascinating and wonderful words of advice for us as we end this program.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to second Brooke's thanks, Jacqueline, for joining us tonight. Your talk was very interesting, and thank you for sharing your story with us, and also the in-depth Q&A questions were very informative. So thank you again. In closing, I'd like to give special thanks to the Friends of Ford in the audience tonight. Your support makes programs like this one possible. And again, I encourage everyone to check out the museum and library website and the foundation website for information on upcoming programs and events, and to visit the museum in Grand Rapids to see the Women in Uniform exhibit, which is on display until May 6th. Thank you everyone for attending, and good night.